where you would draw a picture of something. If you had an ox, right? You draw a picture of an ox and you say, here's an ox, and here's a deer, and here's a door, and those kind of things. Um, Eventually, they started saying, like, this is a little bit too complicated. And so we could boil it down. And you start thinking about the different types of sounds. And eventually you come to the idea that you have like let me use the B as an example. So you have a B, but really if you think about B, it's a B, the B is the B, but then the E part of it, right, is with a vowel. So you could have B, you could have ba, you could have boo, you could have bo, you could have, right? So each consonant with a vowel, because we pronounce them together, right? Same thing with T, right? So you could have T, you could have ta, you could have ti, you could have tu, um, and a consonant. So eventually they moved to what we call syllabic script. And this was used throughout a lot of the ancient world. Um, and basically you would have something like in this part of the world, maybe like 75 different shapes that you had to memorize. But that's better than having to memorize a different shape for every item that exists and then try to figure out how I'm going to represent verbs and things like that. But with the alphabet, they separated the consonants from the vowels, right? And then you could boil all of this stuff down into something a little bit over 20 symbols. Now, if you think about hundreds and hundreds of symbols, think about like Egyptian hieroglyphics. That's really complicated. How many people are really going to be able to master that? Not that many, because most people have to live in the real world, producing food, working, and things like that. Coptic?
The people still right now.
Not so
Some
much.
people.
It's a church language mainly. Yeah, but not a spoken language. Aramaic was still spoken until relatively recently, but now the communities are on the borderline. But
The Syrian
Coptic,
civil war has done a lot of damage to the Aramaic speakers. The
yeah,
last ones left in the few villages.
yeah,
What can I say? Sorry,
um,
but
yeah. Coptic was the ancient Egyptian language written in Greek letters, and they had to add a few extra letters because there were some sounds that weren't in Greek, and so then that was the Coptic language. Um, but when you boil it down to like 25, right? All of a sudden that's doable for a lot more people. So this was really why it was a revolution in knowledge, because so many people now could begin to read and write and have access to knowledge that they never had access to before. Eventually, the Greeks borrowed the alphabet from the Phoenicians. Yeah, and the Phoenician language is very similar to Hebrew, right? A lot of similarities, and a lot of the letters are very similar in shape. So um, the word alphabet in Greek, it comes from two words, alpha and beta. The first two letters of the Greek alphabet are alpha and beta. The first two letters of the Hebrew alphabet are aleph and bet, right? But remember, the Greeks borrowed from the Phoenicians and the similarities. So they got it from Phoenician, and that's why they call alpha alpha, because it's related to the word for olive. Pretty cool, right? Now you start to see like there's connections. Wow, I never realized, right? These pathways kind of between the ancient Near East and Greece and Rome. Yeah.
the ancient Greek alphabet though was more similar to the Paleo Hebrew script that you have up there. For example, I think the word aleph was based on ox head. So, and I mean, if you do turn the letter A upside down, it does look like a little ox head with the horns,
Yeah.
right? That was the idea. But then somehow in the whole process of transmission, the Greeks turned it right side up, and then aleph is based on another variation of that,
That's right.
arguably.
Well, that helps to figure out, right? To pinpoint Phoenician as the source of the
Yeah.
alphabet. but that's a great observation. All of these were basically kind of boiling down symbols that had been around before from the ancient history of the attempts at writing. So Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, is not a vowel sound, but it's actually a consonantal sound. It's a sound that we don't represent in English. We have it in English, but we don't really represent it. And it's what we call the glottal stop. I see you here. If you drink water, you go right like that. It's just closing the airway a little bit, and it's just that little bit. If you want to say, even if you want to say right, you got to start by closing your throat a little bit, and that's Aleph. We do have it in English, right? If you're going to start something with a excuse me with a vowel, you've got to have a little something there in Hebrew and in Phoenician, in Aramaic and Arabic. They actually indicate it in the writing system. By the way, no writing system is ever perfectly complete to include all the information that you need. One of my professors, was always want to say that written languages are for people who already know the language, not for people who are learning it. So it's never going to be as exact and like include every little bit of information. And I always point out in the word Miami. Oh, we're out of time. Yeah, Miami. You would never know how to pronounce that word unless you knew how to pronounce the word. There's two I's in it, but each I is different. The first one is I, and the other one is E. We say, but it's the same symbol. How could it be two different things? Well, that's the complications of the English writing system, right? We have a lot of things that are different. You have to have special knowledge. So we'll pick it up from here with the alphabet next class. Guys, welcome. I hope you have a great semester ahead, and we'll meet back here on Thursday.